Welcome back to the next section of Docker and Visual Studio Code training. In this section, we're going to cover Docker and Visual Studio Code. We're going to understand the background of Visual Studio Code as well as the Docker extension. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of a background for myself of how I discovered Visual Studio Code. And actually, I'm based in Switzerland and I was riding the train and the person next to me actually mentioned, hey, you should actually try Visual Studio Code as I'm working. And I thought, weird, that's strange. This guy just randomly is telling me to try a different IDE. So, of course, when he wasn't looking, I downloaded Visual Studio Code, tried it, and I was blown away. It's really a single interface where I can accomplish everything. I can manage my code, I can do all my Docker commands, I have my terminal. And what it enables me is less context switching. I mean, Visual Studio Code probably replaced 3 or 4 applications for me. Replace a terminal window, replace an IDE, as well as some other tools that I was using. So now I'm using Visual Studio Code as a single tool, basically a single pane of glass, which enables me to do my Git commands and manage my code. I can also interact with my Docker containers. I can also run the terminal all within Visual Studio Code. So again, it really enables me and my workflow, and it provides all these different possibilities. Now, Docker and Visual Studio Code together is really an amazing mix because Visual Studio Code in itself is amazing. Now we're actually adding the Docker extension. And for myself, it's extended capabilities beyond my workflow that I even imagined. So what are we talking about? All right, Visual Studio Code is loved by dev and ops. And it's not just me saying that, but actually the Stack Overflow survey from 2019, as you see here, the Visual Studio Code is the most popular IDE available on the market. So integrated development environment. You see 50.7% of the developers surveyed said it's their favorite or their most popular development environment. Now, what's brilliant also about Visual Studio Code is it integrates directly to Docker Desktop. So if you have Docker installed locally, it works hand in hand together. And the Docker extension then is able to read all the information locally and visualize it within Visual Studio Code. Now, the Docker extension is relatively new compared to the Visual Studio ecosystem. It is also managed and maintained by Microsoft themselves, so it does have a large company presence behind it, a big contribution community. And if you look at it, it's only been general available since March 2020. So not so long. If you look at the history of the extension, it's been around a while, but now we're getting into a cadence where we're getting lots of great releases and features racked into the Docker extension. Now, the Docker extension, as you see, we can get debug, we can get all these build packs built into it as default, and it's just extending our workflow and making Visual Studio Code even more powerful. In the next section, we're going to understand exactly how Docker Desktop and Visual Studio Code collaborate together. So join me in the next section.